A week before our wedding, my fiance, Vernon Staler, announced he needed to marry his first love, Ivy Marlowe, before marrying me. He explained that Ivy's mother had recently passed away, leaving a dying wish for Ivy to marry her true love. Her mom always wanted her to marry a good man while she was alive. I'm just honoring her last wish. Don't overthink it, he said dismissively. Our company had already planned to launch the True Love jewelry collection on the day of our highly anticipated wedding. Vernon, however, brushed this aside impatiently, saying, "It's just a few billion. Does that compare to honoring Ivy's filial duty? If you're so set on making money, find someone else to marry." His cold words left me stunned. I picked up the phone and called home. "Quentin, help me find a new marriage candidate," I said. My brother was incredulous. "Are you calling off the engagement?" he asked. "No," I replied bitterly. "He's marrying someone else." I had overcome countless hurdles to get my parents' blessing for this union and planned the launch of the True Love collection for our wedding day. Now it was all for nothing. After a long silence, my brother finally said, "There's only Jasper Huxley. His family's pressuring him to marry, and he's been looking for a bride recently." I hesitated. Jasper was my sworn enemy and had once cursed my dream wedding, only for his prediction to come true. But with time running out, I decided, it's him. Ask him if he's interested. If not, I'll figure something else out. My brother quickly interjected. "No need to ask. He'll definitely agree." I still wanted confirmation, but before I could say more, a group of people approached me. "You're Vernon's fiancée, right? You're so beautiful. Are you waiting for him to get off work? He'll be down soon. You two are such a loving couple," they said. I lowered my eyes to hide my bitterness. Vernon had introduced me to his colleagues and friends years ago, and everyone envied our relationship. None of them could have guessed he was about to marry someone else. When Vernon finally arrived, he got into the car and handed me a necklace. "Ivy asked me to give this to you. You embarrassed her at the funeral yesterday. Find time to apologize," he said. Recognizing it as a promotional gift from a recent purchase, I replied lightly, "I don't want it." Vernon frowned. "Why are you making a fuss again? You showed up at the funeral and claimed not to be her fiancé, embarrassing her. Yet she still thought of giving you a gift. And this is how you act?" The man who once protected me now defended someone else. Vernon irritably rolled down the window and after a long silence, softened slightly. "Forget it. I'll take you to try on wedding dresses today. I don't want to argue." This was the first time he had softened in months. At the bridal shop, the assistant greeted us warmly. "Mr. Vernon, Miss Willow, your 20 wedding dresses and suits are ready." But Vernon, distracted by his phone, barely looked at the outfits. Noticing my gaze, he quickly pocketed his phone, feigning an apologetic look. "Willow, something urgent came up with Ivy. I need to leave. Try on the dresses yourself and choose a suit for me. I trust your judgment." Without waiting for a response, he hailed a taxi and left. Alone, I told the shop assistant, "Of course I'll choose a suit, but not for Vernon." The groom has changed. I went home, expecting Vernon to stay out all night, but he showed up before dinner with a food box in hand. "I ran all over the city to get this for you," he said, presenting a basket of shrimp dumplings. However, there were 3 fewer dumplings than usual, and 1 bore a bite mark. Earlier, Ivy had posted a photo of the same meal, captioned, "My husband brought me a late-night snack. Hard-working hubby." Mwah. Disgusted, I put down my chopsticks and lost my appetite. "I don't want this. Throw it away," I said. Vernon scowled, but sat down to complain. You don't know how pitiful Ivy was today. My parents went to her house and scolded her for not having money or a decent dowry. She was so upset she cried. "Ivy just got back to the country and doesn't have much money. I want to transfer your dowry to her first." His commanding tone made me nauseous. Sarcastically, I retorted, "So, I have to provide the dowry for your wife?" Once I would have given Vernon anything, but his actions since Ivy's return had shown me where his priorities lay. My response angered him. "What's that supposed to mean? Are you unwilling? You'd better get it together. Ivy is my best friend and you'd better satisfy her needs. Otherwise, I won't marry you." he threatened before slamming the door and leaving. Upset, I went for a run in the park. Midway through, my phone rang. Seeing Jasper's name, I hesitated but answered. His voice, cold and unwavering, delivered a sharp warning. Once you're on my boat, you're mine. If you try to escape, I'll bring you back myself. I stayed silent, not saying a word, as Jasper continued. Send me your ID card first so we can register. I'm worried you'll change your mind. I replied, Jasper, you're wrong. In my heart, I had imagined countless scenarios where he would use marriage to torment me. Yet in the end, I could only suppress my thoughts and say, see you at the wedding, Jasper. As soon as I finished speaking, Vernon appeared behind me. Are you planning to invite Jasper to our wedding? I won't allow it. He looked at me as if I were his adversary. Willow, haven't I already told you not to get involved with Jasper? He's up to no good when it comes to you. If you insist on inviting him, don't blame me for turning against you. He didn't wait for my response, leaving those harsh words hanging in the air. Vernon had always disliked Jasper without reason. Back when we first started dating, he was jealous because I frequently chatted and joked with Jasper on WeChat. Over time, I distanced myself from Jasper, but Vernon's resentment only grew. And now he accused Jasper of harboring ulterior motives. Before I could react, Ivy leaned on Vernon's shoulder and said with a soft laugh, Vernon, you pinched me. The two of them were walking hand in hand. Although Vernon coughed awkwardly, he didn't pull his hand away. Ivy gazed at him with fondness and then turned to me apologetically. Sister Willow, I'm sorry. Vernon and I are just familiarizing ourselves with the wedding process. Please don't mind us. You hurt me and damaged my mother's grave, but I won't say a word. Just don't harm Vernon. I couldn't stomach her act any longer and said coldly, Since you're so eager, I'll find someone to beat you tonight and dig up your mother's grave. Vernon immediately slapped me hard. Willow, how could you be so cruel? His face was dark, his chest rising and falling with anger. I felt a wave of fury. Cruel? You trust her malicious words over our 5 years together? I wanted to demand answers from him, but Ivy stepped forward with a pitiful expression. Sister Willow, I beg you. After the wedding, I'll return Vernon to you. Just please have mercy. Don't harm anyone close to me, especially Vernon, she said as she made a show of trying to kneel before me. Vernon quickly held her by the waist, preventing her from kneeling while glaring at me. Willow, stop with your spoiled rich girl bullying. You know I hate it the most. If you want to marry me, then don't cause any more trouble. After delivering this ultimatum, he added a warning not to show up at the wedding and stormed off. The next day, Vernon contacted me out of the blue, his tone scathing. Willow, did you really dig up Eliza's grave? Baffled, I immediately called my assistant to investigate. What I learned was shocking. Ivy's mother was still alive. She had staged her death to frame me. Furious, I sent Vernon a text. Ivy's mother isn't dead. I've emailed you the evidence. Whether he chose to believe it or not no longer concerned me. 3 days later, Jasper arranged my plane ticket, and I began packing my things. Vernon came home and saw me sorting through my belongings. Half of my clothes were set aside for South City. Why are you packing? He asked hesitantly. I'm moving, I replied flatly. He seemed oblivious to the deeper meaning and muttered to himself, Tyndall Group is in South City. After we're married, we'll settle there. It's good to prepare early. Then, with a stern expression, he said, Apologize to Ivy's mother soon. Don't make this harder for me. I didn't respond, and Vernon left shortly after to register his marriage with Ivy. That night, he didn't return home until late. When I checked my phone, I found a message from Ivy. It included a photo of her and Vernon wearing matching outfits, lying together on the same bed. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to suppress the ache in my chest. Without engaging further, I turned off my phone. Throughout the night, Ivy sent me videos every hour, flaunting her time with Vernon. By morning, Jasper messaged me, Miss Willow, the flowers have bloomed. You can return at your leisure. He attached a photo of 2 red marriage certificates and a pot of blooming red peonies. I was surprised he had kept the plant I had given him so casually years ago. An odd feeling rose within me. I responded with a simple, okay. I set my phone aside and continued organizing my work files. Unnoticed, Vernon had returned and was packing his clothes. I'm staying with Ivy for a few days. She's busy with the wedding preparations. Remember to attend the wedding on time, he said nonchalantly. He assured me he was just helping her and warned me not to create any problems. I won't, I replied, my voice calm, my eyes lowered. After everything that had happened, my remaining feelings for Vernon had dissolved entirely. My composed demeanor seemed to unsettle him, and for a moment he hesitated. But the thought of Ivy's charms likely reassured him, and he relaxed. Willow loves me so much. What could go wrong? He must have told himself. Letting out a sigh, he turned and left without a backward glance. That evening, a helicopter landed in the square. A man approached me and said, Miss Willow, the helicopter is ready. The transportation you arranged is here and will safely take you to South City in 30 minutes, the man said. I nodded and handed him a folder. Deliver this to the wedding venue tomorrow. It's my gift to the bride and groom, I instructed. The next day, I scheduled a message to be sent to Vernon. Happy marriage. At the wedding venue, Vernon looked toward the entrance and asked Secretary Lou, why hasn't Willow arrived? She promised to publicly apologize to Eliza today. Secretary Lou, frowning as she read the news on her phone, replied, she probably won't make it. She's busy with her own wedding right now. Hearing this, Vernon froze in the middle of the grand banquet hall. Champagne roses, Ivy's favorite, adorned the venue, creating a dreamlike atmosphere. Guests mingled below the stage, chatting over glasses of wine, their surroundings picturesque. Yet Vernon stood there clutching his phone, his palms sweaty as he stared at the breaking news. Tyndall Group's president marries and launches the True Love series. Panicking, he quickly dialed a number he knew by heart, but the call went unanswered. How is this possible? He muttered. Ivy rushed over, grabbing his hand. Vernon, what's wrong? Your hands are freezing, she asked. Vernon held her hand but looked away. Willow. She married someone else, he muttered. Ivy glanced at his phone, her brows furrowing before a sly smile appeared. That's impossible. Sister Willow loves you deeply. This must be a business strategy. People in business will do anything for profit, even fake a marriage, she suggested. Fake marriage? Vernon repeated, his frantic demeanor calming slightly. Let's proceed with the wedding, Ivy urged, guiding him toward the stage. The master of ceremonies began, and Vernon forced a smile, exchanging rings with Ivy. They shared a kiss as the guests applauded. Just as everything seemed perfect, the banquet hall doors were thrown open with a loud bang. A group of men in black suits entered in an orderly line. Vernon instinctively assumed Willow had come to disrupt the wedding. He prepared to confront her with a smile that quickly froze. It wasn't Willow, but a team of police officers. Panic flashed across his face. Officers, we're just ordinary people. We haven't done anything wrong, right? He stammered. The lead officer ignored his protests, presenting legal documents. Miss Willow has accused Ivy of illegally appropriating someone else's property. The evidence is irrefutable. Please come with us. Vernon's face drained of color. This is a misunderstanding. The dowry was given to me by Willow, and I gave it to Ivy legally, he argued. The officer frowned. Your so-called legal channel doesn't hold up. Miss Willow does not acknowledge it, he replied coldly. Vernon was desperate. This is her way of ruining my wedding with Ivy, he shouted. The officer cut him off. Please don't obstruct official proceedings. Take her away, he ordered. Ivy was escorted out, leaving the wedding in chaos. Relatives of the bride murmured in disapproval. So that dowry wasn't even hers? How shameless. Meanwhile, Vernon's parents were furious. You idiot. You abandoned a good woman to marry someone like her. Now look at this mess, they scolded. Vernon tried to keep his composure. This is just Willow's scheme to make me give in. I'll talk to her and fix this, he announced, turning to leave. But a man blocked his path and handed him a phone connected to a large screen. Mr. Vernon, this is the wedding gift Miss Willow sent you, the man said. The screen lit up, revealing text messages and videos. Chat logs between Vernon and Ivy from the past year filled the display, including a particularly explicit video that made the guests gasp. Vernon's face turned ghostly white. How did she get these? How did she know everything? He muttered, trembling. His eyes fell on the sender's name, Ivy. Ever since Ivy's return a year ago, she had been sending screenshots of their chats to Willow, subtly pressuring her to walk away. Vernon now realized why Willow had grown so distant, avoiding his touch and acting indifferent. Overwhelmed by the humiliating content, Vernon smashed the screen. Don't look! This is fake, he yelled, fumbling to turn it off. Instead, the volume increased, filling the hall with incriminating sounds. The wedding ended in chaos. As I heard about the scene later that night, I had just returned home with Jasper after our wedding. Reading the news, I couldn't help but smile. You handled that perfectly, I told him, before turning off my phone, cutting Vernon out of my life entirely. Jasper and I had moved into a villa in Nanon as newlyweds. From rivals to husband and wife, our relationship felt awkward. I was about to ask if we should draft an agreement to live peacefully without interfering in each other's lives when Jasper suddenly embraced me and kissed me. Willow, don't get the wrong idea. I only married you because I had no other choice, he said. After a pause, his tone softened. But don't think about playing any tricks. I've never considered remarrying, and you shouldn't either. I was stunned, not noticing the redness creeping up his face. Before I could respond, Jasper's phone rang. He answered it, and after a moment, I heard a familiar voice. Jasper, I need to talk to you. Are you free? Vernon's frantic tone came through the speaker. Before Jasper could reply, I said firmly, It's not convenient. I moved to hang up, but Jasper dodged me. Willow, why are you at another man's house right now? Vernon's voice grew more unhinged. I sneered. That's a ridiculous question. Today is my wedding day. Where else would I be but with my husband? Vernon was furious. You and he aren't just pretending to be married for the sake of the project, he accused. I let out a small laugh. Who even fakes a marriage these days? Are you a child? I retorted. You'd better get a divorce right now. He threatened hysterically. Jasper took the phone from me and spoke coldly. Mr. Vernon, stop disturbing a married woman. Willow is now my wife and has nothing to do with you. I suggest you wake up and accept reality. Vernon shouted like a madman. Jasper, you've always coveted Willow. Now you're using the misunderstanding between her and me to sneak in shamelessly. Do you think she married you out of love? It's only for the jewelry project. She only loves me. I snatched the phone back and hung up. Don't engage with him, he's insane, I said. Both Jasper and I felt a slight flush creep across our faces. Jasper coughed, crossing his arms, though a flicker of concern appeared in his eyes. Worrying over an ex-boyfriend like that? Spineless, he muttered. I shot back. And who was the one who once got heartbroken over me? Jasper abruptly covered my mouth, and in that brief tussle, it felt as if we'd returned to how we used to be. 3 days later, Tyndall Group's anniversary celebration coincided with our return banquet, and the families decided to combine the events. But chaos erupted when Vernon invited reporters to the press conference, accusing Jasper of being a homewrecker. Microphones were suddenly pointed at Jasper, and the atmosphere turned chaotic. Before Jasper could respond, I faced the crowd. The marriage between the Tyndall and Huxley families is legitimate and straightforward. One party wished to marry, and the other agreed. All documentation is in order. Where does the accusation of a homewrecker come in? I advise caution with such claims. Tyndall Group's legal team will not take this lightly. The reporters finally quieted down, their focus shifting. Jasper glanced at me with a rare, indulgent smile. I met his gaze briefly, my ears burning, but Vernon wasn't done yet. He played a compilation of videos on the big screen, narrating what he claimed was proof of Jasper's interference. The clips included moments when Jasper visited me in the hospital after a skiing accident, cheered for me from the audience when I won a jewelry design award, and even set off citywide fireworks on my birthday 3 years ago. Years of secretly filmed footage played, leaving me stunned. No wonder Vernon had been so convinced that Jasper had feelings for me. I glanced at Jasper. His typically stoic face was now red with embarrassment, a contrast that was oddly endearing. Vernon's voice was full of conviction as he condemned Jasper. But I interrupted. I want to make one thing clear. Vernon is already married. He and Ivy obtained their certificate before Jasper and I did. At my cue, my assistant displayed the evidence on the screen. The audience erupted into murmurs. People whispered about the chaotic state of the wealthy, remarking on how Vernon was long thought to be the Tyndall family's future son-in-law, only for the groom to change suddenly on the wedding day. With the revelation of Vernon's marriage certificate to Ivy, the story became even more scandalous. Vernon's expression darkened as he tried to defend himself. Don't listen to her. My marriage to Ivy was a necessity, done to fulfill her mother's dying wish. Willow, you know this. I told you I'd divorce Ivy after that and marry you. Why are you doing this to me? He seemed to expect sympathy, imagining the reporters would applaud his supposed devotion and Ivy's filial piety. Instead, the public turned against him. Poor Willow, to deal with a man like this, what kind of values are these? It's revolting. One observer muttered sarcastically, according to him, I should just die now so my son can marry a princess and live his dream life. Vernon looked stunned. Then, with a resounding slap, my mother struck him across the face. Willow sacrificed so much for you, she said through tears. I couldn't understand why she suddenly changed the groom, and I worried the new one wouldn't treat her well. But it was because of you. She clutched her chest, overwhelmed with grief. Jasper stepped in to support her as I approached Vernon. I couldn't help but smile faintly at the sight of him being publicly condemned. It seems most people can still recognize the truth. Only Vernon thinks his actions are noble when they're really just selfish, I remarked. Vernon, however, refused to back down, pointing an accusing finger at Jasper. So what? It's true Jasper seduced my wife, he shouted. I corrected him firmly. Your wife is Ivy. Don't tarnish my husband's name. Jasper added calmly, there's nothing wrong with admiring someone silently, Mr. Vernon. I have a clear conscience. The reporters chimed in, agreeing, there's no harm in secretly liking someone. It's Vernon who destroyed his own happiness and pushed away the woman he claimed to love. As public opinion turned entirely against him, Vernon grew hysterical. He grabbed my arm, pleading, Willow, you know I love you. I only got involved with Ivy because of her mother. If it weren't for that, I never would have married her. I pulled my arm back, looking at him coldly without a word. He grew desperate, shouting, It was for filial duty. Can't you understand? A single mother's dying wish. I had no choice. How can you rich people be so heartless? You don't know the struggles of ordinary people. Just then, someone pushed through the crowd and a glint of metal caught my eye. Before I could react, Jasper shoved me aside. A knife plunged into his back, blood immediately soaking his clothes. I shouted for a doctor as loudly as I could. The woman who had attacked was already restrained by the security guard, yet she kept screaming, Give me back my daughter, bring her back to me. To my astonishment, the woman turned out to be none other than Ivy's supposedly deceased mother, Eliza. Vernon was stunned. Mom, you're alive? He exclaimed. Eliza tried to grab Vernon's hand, but he snapped back to reality and shoved her away with force. So, you've been lying to me all this time? He roared, his eyes bloodshot. Eliza struggled but managed a strained smile, looking at him lovingly. Vernon, I did it for you. You love her and she loves you. It was someone else who stole you away. I only tried to set things right and help you find happiness, she said. Vernon slapped her across the face. Happiness? My happiness is Willow. You old hag. You and your daughter destroyed everything between us. Go to hell. He lunged toward Eliza, attempting to strangle her, but the police arrived just in time to break up the scene. Eliza was arrested for faking her death, and Vernon was also taken into custody for his violent outburst. At the hospital, I sat by Jasper's bedside, his pale face filling me with guilt. Memories of times I flaunted my happiness in front of him flooded back, along with the harsh criticisms I'd made about his stoic demeanor. What must he have felt back then? Jasper, I'm so sorry, I whispered. I brought the red peony he had lovingly cared for into the room, placing it beside him. Gazing at the flower, I made a solemn vow. From this moment forward, I would be his wife and his alone. The next morning, as I opened my eyes, I found Jasper staring at me. Miss Willow, he said softly. I heard everything. Please take care of me for the rest of our lives. Smiling, I replied, let's look after each other. Jasper's recovery was swift, and soon he was discharged. To make up for our missed honeymoon, my mother booked an island tour for us. I hadn't expected to run into Vernon there. On the beach, he blocked my path, his expression earnest as he apologized. At first, I thought he had changed, but then he suddenly grabbed me. Willow, I love you. Leave Jasper and come back to me, he pleaded. His audacity stunned me. Lifting my gaze, I looked him up and down and said firmly, I am married now. Please respect yourself, Mr. Vernon. At that moment, Ivy, who had been hiding behind a tree, rushed forward and slapped me. You witch! She shouted. I'm pregnant, and you're still trying to steal my husband. Everyone, look at this homewrecker. She doesn't deserve to be called human. Ivy's face twisted with fury, and her words dripped with malice. A nearby ice cream vendor chimed in. What kind of woman goes after another's husband when the other woman is pregnant? That's despicable. Others began murmuring their agreement, casting judgmental glances at me. Turning to Vernon, I asked, Is this what you call love? Letting Ivy publicly slander me as a mistress? He avoided my gaze, his head lowered in silence. I scoffed and was about to respond when Jasper stepped in. Pulling me close, he pushed Ivy away. Let's get the facts straight, he said, pointing at Vernon. This man was engaged to my wife but used her dowry to marry his first love, Ivy, and even got a marriage certificate. Now, broke and desperate, he's trying to leech off my wife. She rejected him, so he resorts to extortion. Is this the behavior of a decent person? Vernon was left speechless, his face turning pale as onlookers murmured in recognition. Isn't that the man who disrupted the Tyndall Group's press conference? The one who dumped their daughter for his first love and planned to remarry her later? Someone remarked. Doesn't he ever look in the mirror? What a gold digger. Another chimed in. Realizing they had been manipulated, the crowd dispersed, grumbling about their wasted time. I exhaled deeply, burying my head in Jasper's shoulder. Husband, thank goodness you were here, I said gratefully. Jasper held me tightly, a proud smile on his face. I've been waiting for you to become my wife. Naturally, I'll always protect you from men like him, he said. I couldn't help but feel lucky to have a husband like Jasper. Vernon, watching us, exploded in anger. He shoved Ivy aside harshly. This is all your fault, he yelled. Tears welled in Ivy's eyes. Let her go. She doesn't love you anymore. We're married now. Can't we just live peacefully? She pleaded. Live with you? Keep dreaming, Vernon sneered. You and your mother are nothing but frauds. Poor and useless. You're not even worth a strand of Willow's hair. Why would I want to be with you? Ivy stared at him in disbelief. That's not true. You told me I was the best woman in the world. Vernon shot back. You're delusional. You believe everything said in bed? Ivy's face crumpled in pain. Even so, you bailed me out. Doesn't that mean you care for me? She asked desperately. Vernon's sneer deepened. I only bailed you out to use you against Jasper and Willow. You're nothing to me. If you didn't resemble Willow slightly, I wouldn't have even looked at you. Ivy collapsed, screaming hysterically. I felt nothing but revulsion for Vernon as Jasper and I walked away, hand in hand. After our honeymoon, we returned to South City, where I officially took over the company while Jasper managed the Huxley Group. Despite our busy schedules, we made time for each other and built a happy life. One day at the office, my assistant informed me that a man was waiting downstairs to see me. I declined, but she insisted. It's Vernon, she said, and he claims he's here to fulfill a promise. Reluctantly, I went to the reception room where Vernon sat holding a padlock. I recognized it immediately as the one we had placed on the Wish Bridge 3 years ago. Facing the evening light, he smiled faintly. Willow, we said this padlock would grant a wish someday. I finally thought of one. I sneered. Is that so? What's your wish? I asked coldly. Looking serious, he replied, I want you to give me another chance, even if you won't leave Jasper. Jasper, I want to spend the rest of my life with you, I said softly, fiddling with the padlock as my smile grew. Then, looking at Vernon, I added, "You should take this to Ivy. After all, it's her name engraved on the padlock." Vernon, stunned, quickly grabbed it back to check. It seemed he had forgotten that he had carved his ex-girlfriend's name instead of mine. What Vernon didn't know was that on the day he chose to marry Ivy, I had revisited all the places we once went together. That was when I found this padlock. In that moment, I felt nothing but pity and absurdity, which only solidified my decision to change the groom. "Vernon," I began, "it seems even you don't truly know who you love. Even when our feelings were at their peak, you carved your ex-girlfriend's name instead of mine. Perhaps in your heart, the unattainable always seems better. When you had me, you thought of Ivy. Now that you've lost me, you're scrambling to make things right. But the truth is, Vernon, you only love yourself." With that, I turned to leave. Behind me, Vernon's cries echoed, harsh and heart-wrenching. But all I could think about was what Jasper might have prepared for dinner. Maybe braised fish? I had mentioned wanting it a few days ago. Knowing his pride, he probably took it upon himself to secretly make it. However, I didn't get to enjoy the braised fish. That night, I started vomiting unexpectedly. After a visit to the hospital, I received some surprising news. I was pregnant. Jasper, overjoyed, held me tightly, grinning like a child with his first toy. He couldn't stop smiling, and his excitement was contagious. The doctor assured us that the baby was healthy. And as Jasper and I prepared to leave hand in hand, we encountered an old acquaintance in the corridor. There, kneeling on the floor, was Ivy, pleading with Vernon to let her keep their child. But Vernon, holding the abortion agreement in his hands, signed it without hesitation. His expression was icy as he looked at Ivy. "Things that aren't wanted should be dealt with early. I don't want this dirty bloodline to exist in the world," he said coldly. "Ivy, when you told Willow about us, you should have considered the consequences. I warned you clearly. I can give you anything but never the title of wife. This is your punishment. I will never forgive you for this." I cleared my throat softly, drawing Vernon's attention. He turned to us, his gaze landing on the pregnancy report in our hands. For a moment, he froze. His lips twitched as he managed to mutter, "Congratulations." But his tone was devoid of emotion, neither joy nor sorrow. His eyes, however, reddened slightly as he stared. Ivy, unable to hold back any longer, broke into sobs. Shortly after, her mother, Eliza, arrived, causing an even greater scene. In a desperate attempt to stop Vernon, Eliza even tried to injure herself by throwing herself against the wall, but nothing could change his decision.